I'm recording from my office computer, so that way, Becca can watch later if she wants to. Nobody should be in my office. How's your first week going? Do you feel what your semester is gonna look like? Anybody overwhelmed? Are you feeling good? Well, have some questions or concerns. We are here to help. Okay, so you want to go. One, Nate, here. And that means you are Arturo. Okay. All right, we're all here. We had one student drop from Monday. So used to each other. We have a very small class, but that's okay. I like it smaller because we get more comfortable with each other. Class discussions are usually much more engaging. I'm hoping that's going to be the case. We'll find out this. We're going to have a first lesson and discussion. We are going to start on chapter 1 today. Hopefully, the technology is going to work. Brightspace. I'm not going to be staying on Brightspace for the lesson today, but I did want to show you. I did post some content for today's lesson. So we are in week 1. You can go through these if you would like to. This is just what we anticipate on learning in this today's class session. We will be looking at these 2 items a little bit later in today's lesson. So our speech assignment, or the first speech assignment, and the grading rubric for that assignment. This is the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint will always be available if I have one for that lesson. So if you want to download it, print it off, take notes on, or if you want to take notes on your laptop, you can directly download it and take notes on there. And then this video is the featured example at the very beginning of the semester. I just put it there for ease of access for you, but if you scan the QR code with your camera on your phone, it'll pop it up on your monitor and watch that too. We have some additional items that you can use for your reference, like if you do today's class and you're just like, yeah, I'm not buying it, communication, public speaking is not important. I have 2 more items here that will hopefully try to save you time. And then we have 2 activities that we're going to learn from. 2 activities that are available for today. We will be doing a quiz over chapter 1 at the end of today's lesson. It's going to be on Brightspace, or if you need a copy, I do have one printout. So I can make a copy of the future classes for your tablet or your laptop. This activity here is an extra credit activity. So we're going to start off the semester on a good note. It is over the last half of the chapter, the last 8 of the chapter about ethics and why we need to be an ethical public speaker. What it's asking you to do is to watch the video on page 17 of your textbook and then answer the 3 questions. You'll be able to directly type your questions right to the text box, and you can submit it. It's worth 5 points, so good way to start the semester off with 5 good points. Questions? All right, so as you can see, chapter 1 is an introduction to communication. Hey, it works. Look at that. Had this thing for 7 years and didn't think it worked anymore. Anyway, chapter 1 is an introduction to communication. We're going to be looking at the importance of communication, learning communication in your everyday lives. We're going to define communication. It's a very broad term. Kind of seems relatively easy to define. If I'm asking you what do you think it means, you might be thinking, well, it means to talk. Well, it's a little bit more than that, so we're going to look at what that is. And then we're going to look at the different communication models and look at the difference between presentational speaking and public speaking. And I'm going to just go out on a limb here and tell you that by the end of today's class period, you're probably going to think I'm a giant nerd, and that's okay because I am a nerd. But this is one of my absolute favorite lessons to teach for the entire semester because I love the field of communication, and that's what this chapter is all about. It's communication. So if I make some really dumb, corny jokes, just humor me and laugh. It's good. Okay? So, why is communication important in your everyday life? Why do you think? Don't give me textbook reasons. Just let's have a conversation. Don't choke. I can't save your life. Even if it seems dumb, just tell me, why is communication important?
Well, I guess I don't know, I read somewhere a long time ago that humans were meant to be social creatures. So I guess it's healthy to know how to communicate with others, in order to survive.
Yep, absolutely correct. Humans are communal beings, meaning we want to be around other people, even if you are an introvert. Any introverts in here? Y'all know what introvert, extrovert means? Okay, I'm an introvert, okay, so that means I like to have time to myself, but that doesn't negate the fact that we are communal beings. I mean, I still need that need for other people in my life. There was actually a study, I don't remember who the psychologist was that did it. It's from many, many, many years ago, but he basically did a study in an orphanage where he forbid the caretakers to provide any sort of coddling to the babies, meaning they were allowed to feed them, change their diapers, but they were allowed to love on them, hold them, talk to them. You know what happened to those babies? They died because they didn't thrive. They didn't have that nurturing element in their life. So right there of itself is reason enough to, communicate. What's another reason why communication is important that you think? I guarantee you, you're all right. Okay. You have to do it in order to go through the day. Absolutely. Just like in our classroom setting, I'm kind of forcing you to answer questions. Do it to get to the class. Even if you're not really communicating to anyone else, are you communicating to yourself throughout the day? Yes, absolutely. We all, well, I'm going to say this, generally speaking, we all have an internal dialogue that we have ongoing with ourselves about what we're doing, what we need to do, what we're going to do, and so on and so forth. How we're feeling, what we're going to do next week, whatever. It helps us plan our lives. Any other reasons why communication is important? All right, those are two really great reasons. Hopefully by the end of the class period, we'll have some other ideas as to why it's important. But what are the ways we communicate? Yes, hello, hi, so gestures. Glad you brought that up because we're going to be talking about gestures here in a little bit. What kind of communication is this? Hello or goodbye, right? But more general. Nonverbal, yes. So we communicate through nonverbal means, and then we communicate also through verbal means. Two ways. These messages that we give, either non-verbally or verbally, are they always clear? Do you always know what someone is saying? No. We mess it up. We're human. Communication is incredibly messy. So we need to take that into consideration. Lastly, what about the amount of communication that is available to you? Does that make communication easier? Sometimes. Absolutely. Got a lovely picture here. Do you ever feel like this? You get online, look something up. Maybe it's just something really simple, like, why did my angelfish kill my duck? Something simple like that. Thousands upon thousands of websites come back up, and then we're like, holy crap, that's a bunch of information. I experience information overload very, very easily. Some of you probably do too. That's another reason why we need to learn about communication. It is the simple fact that there is just so much information available to us that we no longer actually read full content most of the time. We do what our textbook authors call horizontal skimming, or speaking. Meaning we look through and skim what we see very quickly. And then if anything jumps out and catches our eye, then we're going to potentially go back and give it more attention. So right there demonstrates that we don't give what we're looking at our full attention. What happens when you don't give something your full attention? Forget about it, sure. Could you potentially make a really wrong decision based on only half paying attention to something? Yeah, there's all sorts of jokes out there about people not paying full attention to the conversations, and then either they get asked a question and they respond completely off topic and they're full of themselves. You don't want to do that. So we engage, or when we engage in this type of processing, we're only partially paying attention to the content. And if that's the case, how can we expect ourselves to really know and understand what we're talking about? We can't. We do need to pay attention to how much information we have access to. We need to make certain that we are not just skimming the information, we're seeking quickly the information, but going through and pulling it out strategically, purposefully, making sure that that information that we're reading is ethical and accurate. Later on in the semester, we're going to be looking at media literacy, which I think is chapter 5. Don't quote me on that. But we're going to talk about how the abundance of information out there can be manipulated or misconstrued. I'm sure, because you all have grown up in the digital age, that's no surprise to you. Anybody can post online. We need to make sure that we're being ethical communicators and consuming that information thoughtfully in order to not perpetuate any inaccurate information. Your textbook authors mentioned Warren Buffett and his high opinion of communication skills. You'll know who Warren Buffett is. I pulled a little snippet from Wikipedia, which in some cases Wikipedia is an okay source. Don't do it in your research papers, but Warren Buffett is an American investor, business tycoon, and philanthropist. He's also the chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. He is considered one of the most successful investors in the world and has a net worth of over $85.6 billion as of December 2020, making him the world's fourth wealthiest person. I think he knows what he's talking about. What do you say he does? I would really like, I would really like to have that much money, but I'm certainly going to pay attention to what he has to say. So, public speaking equals communication, which equals so much more. It's not just standing in front of an audience talking. I really like this quote that I found from Warren Buffett: focus on learning how to write and speak clearly. If you can't communicate, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. Nothing happens. It's a great way to understand the implications of not taking communication seriously. Because we don't, a lot of times, take it seriously, and the fact that we don't teach it in schools like K through 12, communication is often thought as something that, oh, we just know how to do it naturally. Well, that's not wrong. We do grow up talking, learning how to communicate with others. We don't always learn how to do it effectively, which is where college comes in. How do you define communication? Talking? Texting? Is it the way someone sighs? Can someone sigh communicate something to you? Absolutely. What's the textbook definition of communication? Who wants to read that for me? It is on page 4. All right, it's on page 6. I apologize. It's a big, long, convoluted definition. I have it posted here on the screen for you. So communication focuses on how people use messages to generate meaning within and across various contexts. And it is the discipline that studies all forms, modes, media, and consequences of communication through humanistic, social scientific, and aesthetic inquiry. It's wordy, but this is the definition put forth by the National Communication Association, which is an association of scholars who study communication. That's the textbook that the definition of the textbook authors use throughout the text to help us understand the study and how to work within our lives. So the definition has several implications. The first is that people intentionally create messages, meaning our communication is not automatic, nor is it accidental when we are talking to someone. Rather, it is purposeful and it is strategic. However, this is only when we are talking to someone else. The definition also states that the messages are plural, not singular, due to the difference in context. What's context?
Like a topic?
It could be, sure. It's a little bit broader than that. Other ideas as to what context is? Let's add to it.
Like a meaning?
Meaning, okay? More of you were talking. I don't know who, because I can't see your mouth. Who was talking over here? Can come up.
I did, yeah.
All right. Context are the parts of the message that surround the entire message. So think of it as the setting of your message. It is everything that helps us understand what we're hearing or what we're reading. So for example, gestures. I turned away to me earlier. This is a really good example of context. And we're going to talk about gestures for just a minute in relation to context. So I just waved to you, right? Pretty simple. Easy to understand. Let's take the other or more gestures into consideration. According to a July 2017 Business Insider article, this is the OK symbol or gesture in English-speaking countries. So for us that live in English-speaking countries, English as their first language, this means okay. Does anybody disagree? Maybe. Thumbs up has its own. Anything wrong with the okay gesture in the English-speaking countries? No. But if you put it into another context, another culture, it can be and is problematic. In South American countries like Brazil, it's considered vulgar. President Nixon, while he was on a visit in that country, was actually booed for using it while he was addressing the country. In France and Belgium, it's considered offensive, signifying zero or worthless. So we go from okay to worthless. Really great example why context is important. Look at another one. The peace sign in the US. We've got our hands or our fingers facing outward toward the recipient. Pretty harmless? Sure. In our culture, and in the United States context, in the UK and Australia, though, it means up yours. Who likes to be told up yours? I mean, if you're joking with your friends, it's okay, but generally speaking, no. So we need to take that into consideration. Another example, vocal variation, pitch, and inflection. So how high or low your voice is to indicate and help others understand the meaning of your message. The way that we say something and how we punctuate the words can change the meaning. Let's take the simple word okay. Okay with a period. If you're texting someone and you send back okay period, or you receive that, how would you understand what it means? Would you have to refer back to earlier on in the conversation? Yes, you have to take into consideration the context. What does adding the period usually signify though? Potentially, conversation's over. Ladies might pick up more on this. So Lauren, do you have any ideas? Not put you on the spot or anything. Yeah, absolutely. Ending okay with a period usually indicates a little bit of unease, or perhaps, I don't want to say anger, because I feel like that's too strong of an emotion for it, but a little bit of discomfort there. What if you change that period to an exclamation point? How does that change the meaning of the word? Because people are excited in a good way, right? Could you potentially be yelling at someone like they keep, my children, when they keep flapping at me, asking me for something? Okay! Right? Completely changes the meaning, but yet we still have the same word. Communication's messy, it's so much fun. One final conclusion from the authors of the NCA definition of communication is that we communicate in a variety of ways. We just demonstrated literally. We communicate verbally, non-verbally, we communicate through text, face-to-face, electronically, through symbols, through gestures, so on and so forth. The channel that we communicate through can absolutely muddy up the message. So my all-time favorite example here is breaking up with a significant other through a text message. Someone laughed. Why? No, it's not the right thing to do. And why is that? Childish. Sure. This leads us into ways that we can potentially help ourselves understand the messiness that is communication. Communication scholars began realizing and recognizing that communication is so incredibly convoluted. And even though we have models to help us understand it, things are changing every single day. So they attempted to make sense of the hot mess of communication models with individual components that would help us break down something larger into smaller little pieces. Thought process there is that smaller bits are easier to make sense of, and then we can piece them together. Like a puzzle. There are 3 communication models that scholars recognize and use today. Each of them evolved from the model prior to it, okay? And they all are still relevant in today's society, as you will see. Those models are the linear model, the interactive model, and the transactional model. So the first one we're looking at is the linear model of communication. Linear means a line, right? One direction. As you can see on the board, it does just that. Indicates that a message is going in one singular motion, one direction. It can be thought of as a one-way process. For visual learners, I don't remember where I heard this, but it has stuck with me because I am very much a visual learner. Think of it as an archer who is shooting an arrow to a target. That message is the arrow, the recipient of the message is the target. The arrow is going one way. It's not going to jump back out of that target and fling itself back. Okay? Doesn't work that way. That's the linear model. The message in this model has one trajectory. Begins at one point, travels to the other, and then reaches its endpoint or its intended audience. Also in this model, we can see the individual elements that make up the communication process. We have a sender, we have a receiver, and then we have a channel, which is how we send the message. Are we going to say it face-to-face, or are we going to send it via text message or email or snail mail, whatever way? That's our channel. The sender creates the message, so that means that they encode the message. What is it that they want to say? They have to figure out what words they're going to use to convey their message. They're going to pick the appropriate channel, decide how they're going to get that message conveyed to the receiver. Once the receiver gets the message, they are then going to process that message. They're going to process the words that were used to determine they understand what they heard. That's done. There's no feedback. There's no way to let the sender know that the message was received as intended. It's done. Okay? We're going to talk about this idea of noise in the next two models. So this model, while really great starting point for helping us understand communication, doesn't work for a face-to-face situation. Does the message just stop when you're talking to someone? No. That doesn't mean that this model is outdated. It's not. It still does have its place in today's society. This model represents mass communication. So mass communication is, of course, one of the areas of communication that you can study. Looking at ideas like marketing, public relations, things along that nature. Text message, or not text message, sorry. Radio, commercials. There's the word I'm looking for. Commercials that you hear on the radio, that you see on TV. Those are examples of the linear model in action. The companies have put together a message, they have determined who the target audience is, and they determined what channel they're going to use. Whether it's going to be on the radio, or it's going to be on television during prime time, or maybe they're going to do a print ad in a magazine. Generally speaking, the audience, the intended recipient, is not going to be giving any feedback immediately to that message. Does that make sense? So, because we're focusing on communication within a group or with people, the need for a response from the intended audience was recognized as an essential part of the communication process. Therefore, scholars extended the linear model to include a flipped linear model. This became the interactive model of communication. So we can see this represented here on the top gets flipped to go back. This represents the feedback element of it. The sender still encodes the message. They choose what channel they're going to send it on. The message goes to the receiver, who then turns in or decodes the message, then return or flips the turn into the sender and goes through the encoding process to provide that feedback to the original sender, who has now become the receiver, and will then decode that information. So it's very much a cyclical process. So the interactive model allows for the give and take of conversation, and it incorporates feedback, which is ever present in our everyday conversation. What do you think about this model? Is it a perfect representation of how a conversation works? A face-to-face conversation? Nate, you said no?
No, I don't think so. Sometimes the sender might message.
You're absolutely right. And that's just one of the reasons why this model, while great, doesn't work for face-to-face conversations. Again, it doesn't matter or mean that this model is not appropriate for today's society. There are still plenty of examples where we see it. So you can think of it as a procedural process. It follows a process from start to end, much like ping pong, taking turns. We see this through text message, talking on the phone, emails. Those are all examples of the interactive for our model of communication, because one person talks, then the next person, then one person talks, then the next person. We don't talk like this face to face. So we have a much more complex model to represent that. It takes into consideration the context of communication. Takes into consideration cultural differences of communication. Takes into consideration noise that is present in those conversations. So we have the transactional model or the two-way model of communication. So on page 9 in your text, it states that the transactional model builds on the linear and interactive models by recognizing that in many communication instances, the speaker and the listener are simultaneously, meaning at the same time, encoding and decoding messages within an environment that includes the context of the situation, as well as the personal and cultural backgrounds of the communicators. Thus, there is no delay in acting as a sender or receiver, but rather both parties communicate at the same time. Lots going on here. We go from a relatively simplistic model to one that is basically continuous, and it's not just going in one way, it's going in both ways. All right, so let's look at the major changes. Sender and receiver. Okay, what we saw in the linear and the interactive model no longer have that title, because we send messages even when we're not talking. I'm talking to all of you right now, but you're still sending me messages even though you're not talking. How? How are you sending me messages? I can't hear you. You're listening. How do you let me know you're listening? You're paying attention? You're looking at me. And I know that. I know that you're paying attention because you're making eye contact with me. That is a form of nonverbal communication. You are giving. Nodding of the head, yawning, dozing and falling sideways in your chair. I was a student once. I was there. It happened. Those are all forms of nonverbal communication that students said to their teachers while the teachers are lecturing. So because of that, we're called communicators. There is still that give and take when you're verbally speaking though. Noise. This is anything that has to do with the potential interference of a message being either sent as intended or received as intended. And there are various different contexts for noise. We have environmental, physiological, and psychological. Environmental noise is going to be what's actually in your environment. So anything you can hear or see or feel. You can hear the whirring of the heater that will not shut off, which is thus making it very hot in this room, which could potentially impact your ability to pay attention to what's happening. Does anybody get really crabby when they're hot? I do. It's super crabby when it's hot. How about tired? You tired? Yeah. Okay, so if you're crabby and or hot, you're gonna be able to give 100% of your attention to what's going on. Now, it impacts what we're doing because we're thinking about, oh, good God, I'm so tired, I need to lay down, or it's hot in here, I'm gonna jump out the window and land in the snow, rather than paying attention to message. Anything going on out in the hallway? Please grab your attention. I make a joke about myself that I have what I refer to as shiny object syndrome, meaning my attention span is very short and I get distracted very easily. My preferred room to teach in is 132 down the hall because it's very small and it doesn't have this many windows, which I can look out and get easily distracted. I always took keys with my door shut because I get distracted by people walking through the hallway, blocking, okay? So environmental noise, anything that can cause you to not pay attention to what you should do. Physiological noise. This has to do with what you are physically feeling, how you are feeling. How many of you are a ray of sunshine when you're feeling sick? That was a very sarcastic question. I am extremely crabby when I'm sick. My husband and my kids are both, they're all very affectionate and they're all like, Mom, let me love on you because you have a headache. Mom, let me do something. No, get away from me. I'll do it myself. I want to just go hide and be alone. It makes my reception of their messages more negative because I'm crabby. Does that make sense? If somebody else is crabby and trying to talk to you, they might display that by their vocal intonation, by their eye contact, by the pitch of their voice, which could therefore either change the meaning of the message, as we just saw with the example of okay, or it could make them come across as being mad or sad or what have you when they don't actually intend to. If you're worried about something, so psychological, what's going on in your head? If you're worried about a test that you have next week in one of your classes, are you going to be able to focus on what you're presently doing? Maybe not. If you have some really big plans that you're looking forward to this weekend, and it's your last class of the week, are you able to pay full attention? Maybe, maybe not. We can control the psychological noise. The best way to do that is to acknowledge what is coming into your mind. When you're sitting there listening to the lecture, something comes into your mind that you need to pay attention to, make a note of it, give yourself a reminder, and then readdress your attention back to the lecture. Do the same thing in everyday conversation. Physiological noise, you kind of can control that. If you're not feeling well, be honest with people. Hey, I'm not feeling well, I'm not right well. Time to be able to give you my full attention, I'll come back to it. People are going to be much more graceful when you are honest with them. Environmental noise, again, we have some control over it Because we know it can tend to be hot in here, we can open up the windows to allow in the cooler air. If you know that one classroom is really, really hot, but then the next classroom is really cold because we have that variation in this building. If you don't want to drive back to your house in between, or you don't want to go back to your dorm room in between, you can dress in layers to adequately prepare for that. Seems kind of dumb, but the small things can help you be more present. Questions about the transactional model of communication? Whole lot going on in there. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We could spend so much more time discussing all of the various elements, but we don't have that much time. So let me know if you have questions about this. One thing I did forget to mention is that we do need to also take into consideration the idea of rich or winged media. So this is based on the theory of media richness. It was developed in the mid-1980s, and it proposes the idea that different mediums have the ability to reproduce the information over. So either reinforcing that message that's being sent or reproducing it in some way. Some mediums may unintentionally or intentionally change the meaning of a message. So for example, a phone call cannot reproduce visual social cues. When you're on the phone, you can hear the variations in the voice, but you can't see eye contact, you can't see gestures, body movement. So you can't replace that over the phone. Therefore, it makes it a much less rich medium. We can, of course, now due to advances in technology, increase the level of richness by utilizing video calling apps, which lots of people do. But if you're like me, you hate being on camera and don't want to use that. So there is no substitution for face-to-face in that respect. We also need to pay attention to the idea that or the notion of we need to pick the appropriate channel for our message. So thinking back to that idea of breaking up with a romantic partner. Should we break up with that person through text? No. We should probably save that for a face-to-face conversation so that we can convey the feelings associated with it. On page 12 of your book, there is a nice model that demonstrates the level of richness for the various channels we have available. So starting up at the top with face-to-face is being the absolute most rich channel of communication, and then going down to the very least rich form of communication, which is going to be a printed document. We, of course, have also attempted to make up for that as far as in our technological communication form. So we have GIFs, we have memes, we have emojis, but even those don't fully make up for being in a face-to-face conversation. Okay, the last section that we are going to cover is presentational speaking versus public speaking. So this class and your textbook encourages you to broaden your understanding of what public speaking is. And the best way to do that is by differentiating between presentational speaking and public speaking. We are doing presentational speaking in this class. We utilize presentational speaking in our everyday life. So daily interactions, what you do in class, what you do at work, anything you participate in your community can be something as very small as just communicating with one person to communicating in your class of say 25 students. Public speaking, on the other hand, is a much larger setting. It's more formal, okay? It's not something that we do every single day. Generally speaking, the content that you are giving in a public speaking event is going to be memorized. You're not going to have that given tape that you do in a conversational manner, such as with presentational speaking. Therefore, you're going to get very low feedback in a public speaking setting. So I like the image here of Dr. Martin Luther King out in front of all of the people that were there to hear his I Have a Dream speech. That's a public speaking setting. This is not a presentational speaking setting. While they are very different situations, they do, of course, share some commonalities. Both use the same basic skills such as audience analysis, organization, and of course, research. According to the textbook, presentational speaking is a valuable skill that you will use throughout your lives in school, work, home, and your community setting. So, in order to provide proof to back up that statement, the textbook authors have put together a chart on the bottom of page 14, which provides some statistics about the significance or importance of learning these communication and presentational skills. So it is a chart showing the types of skills that newly hired employees or recent graduates need to have as deemed by the hiring organization. So, oral communication skills, presentational speaking skills, 80 to 85% of hiring employers said that was a top skill they wanted in new employees. Teamwork skills in diverse groups, 83%. Written communication skills, 82%. So on and so on. Not going to read that whole chart, you all can read that, but it should drive home the point that communication skills are pretty important. Not just in a speaking setting, but being able to write effectively, being able to research effectively. Okay? These are all skills that you're going to use later on in your career. I promise, not just in my class. Questions? Okay. We are going to shift gears here. We're going to look at the first speech that you'll be giving. It's going to be your self-introduction speech. Only it's going to have a little bit of a twist. Because I don't want you to come up here and introduce yourself to us by just giving a laundry list of things that make up you. So we have 6 of you in here. We had 6 of you come up and be like, hi, my name is Jody. I'm an assistant professor. I have 2 kids. I live in Slade. And you're really boring speech. That is not my goal here. My goal is to learn a little bit about you and get you to use some creative thinking skills, think outside the box. And you're going to introduce yourself to an object. I realize that sounds very abstract, and that's okay. I have lots of examples for it. We will watch this example. This is she's a current student. I think she graduated this semester, but I had her several years ago when she was an early bird. And if you've been around him so long enough, you may remember Sam Solomon. This is his daughter. So we're going to watch her example so you can get an idea of what we're doing here.
There's matter one set, another professional engagement. While there's action, something to that, this is unique to this call. using notebooks and pencils, but also have fun with dreams. My name is Lila Solomon, and I see a pencil in the journal as a good metaphor to describe my life. It shows my ambitions, my personality, my views, where I've been, and where I am going. Now, have you all heard the saying, don't judge a book by its cover? Well, maybe you shouldn't. Like eyes are windows to the soul, little things about this cover can be well. First of all, it says, who am I written? A whole bunch of little owls. Now that's a pun, which is great. It represents my sense of humor, but it's also a Bible, which represents my Christian faith. Now, the words on the outside also mean deeper. Who am I? That shows the journey I'm making to figure out who I am. Now, like a journal, with all of its empty pages, it can be filled like my life. Now, I'm filling my journal with quotes of wisdom to help me understand, reflections on myself and the world around me, and a story of inspiration that may or may not be objective. As a writer, a pencil has to be part of my process. While a pencil is wielded by a creator, I'm a pencil and God is the creator. Writing has shaped my life in a big way. It has made me a better person. It has helped me to understand things I might not have understood before. It has also helped given me a way to serve God. Now, something that I think about a lot when it comes to writing fiction and also journaling is what to do when you make mistakes. Well, I can't erase these mistakes, just like a pencil can't flip itself over and erase it. It's written. But God can turn me over and erase it. That's the message of salvation. Now, mistakes can also be factored into the ghosts, taking something hard, taking some word you messed up, and turning it into something new. That represents visiting and making a lesson that I probably will continue to learn throughout the rest of my life. I'm a pencil. My life is a journal with all of the empty pages stuck to me. God is the artist. He created me, and He is making me every day, even when it comes to people. Now, I want to inspire and create something, but I have to do it through Him because the pencil is not going to stop me. Thank you guys for your time, and I hope this helps you.
A better idea of what I'm going for with this idea of an object. I do have some other examples for you. If you want to see her outline, you can download it and see what her outline looks like. We haven't gone over outlines in class yet, but I do want you to try to format in an outline. You don't have a lesson on that. But I want to see what your understanding of outlining is. So think of this self-introduction piece as a baseline. I'm getting to understand where you all are in your ability to prepare for and deliver it. So I have 3 other examples. These are all examples from previous students. Yes, I got permission to use all of these examples, so you don't have to worry about the particular words unless I ask you. I don't ever do it without getting permission. On these examples, though, there is one thing you don't have to worry about. At the top here, where it says YouTube video link, we're still in person, so we're going to deliver the speeches in person. And you can ignore that part of the outline. This young lady did her speech over a pepper, spicy pepper, to explain how she or who she was by using a spicy pepper. So you can go through and read this. But it is there for you to use as inspiration. And softball. Okay, you see that this one is a little bit more detailed. This would be called a preparation outline, as everything the speaker wanted to say in the outline. You can go through and read that one. And then finally, we have a third one. This is even more detailed. This student utilized a wolf. Okay, so three really great examples for you. Let's take a look at this detail. Grading rubric. Now, I'm going to be completely honest here. That's probably extremely hard to do. For you to not know. I promise it does come up clear on here. But if you deliver the speech and you show that you put effort into it, you're gonna get all the points for this speech because it is just a baseline. But I am looking at where you are as far as you create content, how you organize it, the level of creativity, thinking outside the box, and then of course your actual presentation delivery skills. Are you able to make eye contact? Do you speak in a monotonous tone? These are all things that we're going to talk about and learn throughout the semester. So I want to know where you are right now. That is there for you to use as a guide. There, those examples are also posted down here at the bottom of the module as well. Some other examples that I have had students use. Oh my goodness, I should say what hasn't a student used before. Because we are a school that has a lot of athletes, of course I have a lot of sports references. So any object of a sport, baseball, basketball, golf ball, taking the individual elements of those items. So the lines in a basketball, the stitching on a baseball, connecting those to maybe milestones in your life, things that help shape who you are. Another example, this determination, the perseverance that it takes to be a good team player. How has that shaped who you are as a person? Just an example there. Other examples, people have used text. They have used musical instruments. I had somebody use a paperweight once, a Sharpie. Somebody used their hand, which was really creative. There is nothing off the table here. With the exception that it has to be appropriate for a college class. There's that. It can be a quote. It can be an idea. It does not have to be something that you can physically touch. Okay, so if you really have a quote that you live your life by, that can be your object. I do always like to tell students that if I were giving this speech, my object would be the phrase just believe. So I would introduce who I am, what makes me through that phrase. Tell us as much as you want. You don't have to overshare. Just trying to get a little bit better understanding of who we all are. Questions about it? Everybody will be delivering this speech a week from today. We are going to deliver it in class. And as long as the recording went okay, we will be recording them so Becca will be able to watch your speeches as well. Next class period, we are jumping to chapter 6 and 7. And we're not going to be covering everything in both of those chapters. So pages in chapter 6, 155 through 165. That's going to be topic selection, topic forms, and frameworks, and then we'll be covering bits and pieces pieces out of chapter 7, which is about narrative. Final questions? Nope. All right, we have a short 10-question quiz that you should be able to finish in no time to wrap up the lesson with. Who needs a paper copy? Just one? Okay, awesome. You do have 2 chances to take it online. Keep in mind that some of the questions I might have to go in and manually grade, so the grade it shows you won't be accurate right off the bat. This printed off really, really wonky, so this section goes on down here, and then the text box where the answer was 7 in. You're welcome. One thing that I maybe should have mentioned before is that I do let you use notes on your quizzes. So if you take notes while we're having lessons, you can always use those. I don't let you use your textbook notes. There is one little caveat for today's quiz. We didn't actually cover ethics in the lesson, so you can use your textbook for the ethics portion. It's the last section in the chapter. And when you are done, you are free to go. That extra credit assignment, you can do that at any time. It says that it's due by 4 p.m. today, but if you don't get to it until this weekend, that's fine too. Just before we move on to the next